Alabama all over LSU. Now the backstretch of the season, and the Crimson Tide looking like a team that is destined to make the college football playoff. But they got to take it game by game. We're going to talk about the burning of the Bayou and Alabama dominating LSU right here on Cover Crimson Sunday. Roll Tide, everybody. Lots to talk about. Let's get this started. All right, that's Clint Lamb. I'm Mick Gillispie. Welcome to Cover Crimson, brought to you by mybookie.ag. Use the promo code NEXTROUND to double your initial deposit. Clint, you and I got together last night on the post-game show. People, if you didn't check it out, get in there. A lot of calls, a lot of good times. Alabama 42, LSU 13. Tigers scored right at the end of the game, a little cosmetic work, but it didn't really help that much. But I'll tell you what, so many things to talk about today, and we'll have Chris Marler will join us as well. But your thoughts, kind of having a little time to sleep on this
one? When's the last time you've been this impressed with an Alabama victory, Nick? Just, I mean, and granted, it might take you some time to think about it, but I mean, I was even trying to think back to like the last couple of Nick Saban years. Can you remember a time that Alabama played a team this good, and was able to dominate to this degree?
No, not on the road either. I mean, it's been a while. Road wins in the SEC have been far and few between. I mean, last year they beat Auburn and it took a miracle. They lost to Vanderbilt and Tennessee this year, and so they're tough. They're tough, and they're tough for Georgia to win on the road, and then they're tough for Texas to win on the road. It's tough for any team to win on the road in the SEC these days.
Yeah, it felt like that Alabama, they had a good game plan going in on both sides of the football. The guys executed it. And what you ended up seeing is, and we talked about this last night, was just complimentary football, right? I mean, it was offense was doing what it needed to do to have long, sustained drives, keep the defense off the field, keep them fresh. Defense was providing the offense with some extra opportunities as far as turnovers. And then the offense was taking advantage of those opportunities and putting up touchdowns when they would give them to them. So it's just like, that's exactly what you want to see. I loved the game plan as far as it was even late in the game, and they were being really aggressive, against LSU's offense. And so, I liked that. I liked the aggressiveness that Nick Sheridan had in this game. Wasn't a whole lot of explosive plays as far as the passing game, just because they were unable to connect. I mean, obviously there was multiple shots down the field. I think that's coming in the future when you don't have weather involved and some of that. I mean, guys were open vertical. E-Man was open on one. Ron Williams was open on another. So just unable to connect on a couple of them, but I still think they're in really good shape as far as that aspect, on top of the fact that Jalen Milroe looks a lot more comfortable or confident, decisive again with the running. Defense is playing good. So, I mean, I think Alabama fans, this is as encouraged as they possibly could be coming out of a game like this.
And it's a big one too. I mean, if you lose, not only are you out of the college football playoff race this year, but also it sends a lot of questions about where your program is under Kalen DeBoer. And you would have lost to the second of three rivals that you play every year and that people pay attention to. So for a lot of different reasons, that was a great win for Alabama and a dominant win. And the other thing too is we were wondering, watching the Georgia game, they had the big lead, and then was that a fluke because they were so bad in the second half? Alabama bad on third downs coming into this game. We're excellent on third downs in this game. They seemed disciplined, even though they had some penalties. I still felt like they were in control the entire time. So they hit the three things that I thought were most important: Milroe running, and then those two.
Well, and here's the thing about it. It's like the Georgia game, the reason that we talk about that being such an extreme circumstance is it wasn't the slow burn like this LSU game was, where Alabama got, an early lead. They get it to multiple scores rather quickly, but they didn't really start pouring it on until the second half, as they're continuing to make it, 28, and then 35, and then 42. With Georgia, it all happened so fast that Alabama positioned itself so early in that game to have a commanding lead that it's very hard to kind of maintain that against a really good football team. If it would have been Alabama comes out in the first quarter, they get up 14-0 immediately. Second quarter, maybe it climbs to 21. It's 21-0 at halftime. Then the third quarter, it gets to 28. Then it's a little bit different. The flow of the game is different than when you get out there in the first quarter and it's 21, 28-0 before you can even blink. That really puts, it's strange, but that really puts the team that's up 28 points, a lot of pressure on them, because the other team's like, this is pretty much over. Let's just do what we do. Let's try to cut into this. We'll go for it on fourth downs. We'll do all those different things. And so it's a different feel than maybe the Georgia game was. But bottom line is that I love how they continue to be aggressive in the second half. I love the fact that they were changing up pre-snap, post-snap pictures for Garrett Nussmeier. I think he had some trouble with that. And so it was a really good performance on both sides of the football.
Loved it. Loved it. Great win. Let's bring on Chris Marler and see what he has to say about this and kind of keep this thing going. Guys, we're brought to you by, again, mybookie.ag, promo code next round, double your initial deposit, and be part of covercrimson.com, man. That's where we all hang out. When you do the annual subscription, boom, you get this T-shirt while supplies last. So take advantage of that and be part of what we're doing. All right, Chris, good to see you, man. Roll Tide, your thoughts on the Alabama win, 42-13.
So in just quintessential fashion of the kind of fan that I am, I texted Clint. The last thing I've texted him before today was, there is just no effing GD focus or lack, or was it, I said, like lack of execution or like situational awareness or something, because we came out of that timeout on 3rd and 3, took a delay game, then like lined up for a field goal, got another delay game or whatever it was. I like lost my mind. Like 30 seconds later, we got the ball right back. I could not have been more impressed with the game plan. The physicality of it was the most impressive part. Like Georgia was cool because I hate Georgia for one, and then two, because they came out with their hair on fire out of the bye week. You're up, what was it, like 30-7 at the half, 28-0 in the first quarter. The scheming offensively in that game was awesome. This was different. They lined up and ran right at him. And I'll tell you what, guys, what might have been like more impressive than any of that, we consistently got pressure on Nussmeier last night against an offensive line that has rarely gives that up.
I will say that to me, that was probably the most surprising part of the entire thing, was how they were able to generate the pressure, right? When you talked about that offensive line, the tackle play, the edge rushers that Alabama has, the fact that they were somewhat, they've been effective pass rushers, but it hadn't really went to a situation where it was a lot of racking up a lot of sacks. It felt like that, especially when Quandarius Robinson went down. I thought that was an interesting wrinkle as far as what Alabama was going to do. You started seeing more Yanze Pierre. You saw Keon Keeley right there at the end of the game when Alabama was up big, but he's playing bandit. It's a different position. You started seeing more Yanze. I was really impressed with their ability to put pressure on Garrett Nussmeier. We knew if they were going to be able to do that they would actually be able to force some turnovers, because he's been really bad at that this year. But as far as what was probably the most surprising part to you? Was it like Milroe's legs? Was it the lack of penalties by Alabama, like more disciplined play? Was it the defense being able to do what they did against Nussmeier? What was most surprising to you from this game?
It was probably all these rival fan bases that have spent the entire offseason saying that Jalen Milroe is just a running back playing quarterback. And then last night, shocker, they all realized he's a very, very good runner, seeming like they had forgotten about that as well. That part didn't surprise me at all, because we haven't seen a ton of long runs out of him. It was good to see him finally. The dogs are about to be pissed. It was good to see him break a long one for 72 yards, I think, to really ice the game. But again, I think that they just looked more physical. They looked like they had a lot more pride. They were chippy a little bit because it's a rivalry game, but it wasn't like Vandy chippy. It wasn't like that kind of crap. It seemed like everybody was focused and locked in. And that was the biggest thing for me coming out of the bye week.
Yeah, look, I'm with you on the running, but I feel like Alabama self-inflicted a lot of this by not working the run in better. And it got to the point where we're wondering, is Milroe hurt? or is someone in his camp saying, hey, you got to throw more for higher draft status? Because it's got, or was he in a slump? All I know is that what we saw last night makes Alabama look like a really scary team.
Dude, I mean, think about how good they look, because you start thinking about big picture, like of how good. I mean, this defense has played incredible. And like, by the way, never putting yourself in a situation besides the Vandy game, which also had a pick six, they have not put themselves in a situation all year where they are having to come from behind. And I hope that doesn't come back to bite them later in the season, or like if they get to the playoffs and you're in some of these like tougher games. But I mean, right now, like they have done everything you could possibly ask them to do, especially at the start of games, especially in the first half. And last night was another example of it. Like, this is not a bend but don't break defense, in my opinion. I hate that phrase. But man, like, I mean, like, you think about how good LSU was in third downs all season long. You think about how good they were in the red zone, and every time they got close, they bowed their neck, and it was the same mentality at the end of that Missouri game, and it transferred over to this one.
Yeah, and you talked about how excited you were that they put the starters back in, and there was like this real.
And that white kid.
What do you mean? You talking about Bray Hubbard?
I don't think that's his name. That doesn't sound right.
I mean, sure, he's a starter now, so
I was wrong. That kid is good. That kid is really good.
He's really, really good. And just watching how things unfolded, what I liked about it was there were times where adversity struck. All right. I mean, you're talking about LSU's first drive of the game. They rip off a really long run on an outside zone. You start to wonder, okay, if they're going to be able to have this success consistently, it could be a long day for Alabama's defense. You talk about the fact that on that, to start the second half, they go on that really long drive. They get down there near the goal line, and Deontay Lawson ends up capitalizing. Great job of baiting the quarterback coming off of a route and then intercepting that pass. That stopped all momentum. You talk about the fact that when Alabama's offense was given extra opportunities through turnovers, they did a great job of putting together drives, keeping the defense off the field. Just very complimentary football. I've said that a million times, but I don't think people realize how critical that is, and especially as far as like long-term success. When you've got a football team that's doing that, that's helping not only playing good football, like you can look at the Vanderbilt game and say Alabama's offense played good football. I mean, 35 points in 17 minutes or just over 17 minutes. That's good football. Who's going to argue that? But at the same time, was it complimentary football? Were they setting their defense up for success? In my opinion, they weren't, because they were scoring too quickly. They couldn't have any sort of long sustained drives. What I loved about this, what happened on Saturday night, is the fact that they were able to do that, and not just once or twice. It was pretty consistently. Yeah, I mean, outside of like that 72-yard run from Jalen Milroe, and he had a couple of long runs, but it was more so just being able to put together long sustained drives in the defense. I mean, yeah, I agree with you. Bend but don't break. I think that gets overused some, but there were times where they bent, but they did not break. So that is something that really I think is kind of new for this Alabama team, and it's really encouraging, because this is the time that you want to start seeing some of that stuff.
How about the fact that this is an LSU team where the strength of this entire team is their offense and the quarterbacks and receivers? And you look up at the end of the first half, going into halftime, and they had 2 receptions from receivers in the entire first half, and it was the same kid for like 17 yards. Kane Womack has just done an incredible job to get everyone on the same page. And it's not like the same kind of sack production you had a couple years ago with Will Anderson or Dallas Turner, but like they are constantly harassing the quarterback, and it was awesome to watch.
Yeah, look, I'm with you on that too. I thought a big play in the game was when they hit some chunk plays and they get the ball down to inside the red zone, and Alabama forces them to kick a field goal. Mm-hmm. And to me, I felt like that was a momentum changer. And then Bama comes back down, scores a touchdown, and all of a sudden it's like, you're comfortably ahead, and they missed a big opportunity, and then it seemed to snowball from there.
Wasn't it nice watching the other team, like the other side, get like negatively affected by like bad penalties in bad situations to like continue drives, just like dumb mental mistakes? Like, so that part for me was kind of like a breath of fresh air, because it really, my biggest concern was that it seems to be like this weird lull or lapse that we like have in the second quarter of like the past couple games, But like as Clint pointed out earlier, that was one of the best parts of this entire offensive like performance was how many times did you look up and it was 2nd and 4 or 3rd and 2? And like this has been an offense that as explosive as they are, as good as they are and can be, they have been in a lot of 3rd and longs. I think they've been in more 3rd and 7s like than any other team in the country. I heard it on Twitter, so it's got to be true. Going into this game, but all night, I mean, they were getting ahead of the sticks. They were moving and I thought that Milroe did a really good job of just going out and executing, like not overthinking it, not trying to force any throws. Like you didn't see that happen, I think, like once the entire night. So, and the good news on that is, if this kid would just cut it loose and run, he can outrun everyone in the field like you saw last night. It just makes him even more of a threat in everything that he does offensively. But he missed 2 open receivers last night, like barely missed 2 open. Like it would have been touchdowns. I think it was like on the 2nd or 3rd drive. I have zero doubt in my mind like that's the strength of his entire game. Like that part will be fine. So I'm not upset that he missed that, because now you've kind of unveiled all of the other tools that he has.
What I loved was how the game plan going in, if you had watched where LSU's defense had really struggled, and this is why I talked about Whit Weeks against Texas A&M, I didn't feel like he had his best performance. Now, Marcel Reed comes in for Weigman. He's a different style of player, but when you watched LSU's defense against the Lenore Stellars earlier in the year, it's the quarterback run was really hurting them, but I think it was really implementing a good balance between attacking between the tackles and then doing the perimeter stuff. And a lot of Jalen Milroe's success, or a lot of the way that they utilize him, was not a whole lot of between the tackle stuff. Yeah. I loved how they implemented that for this game, and I'm sure they'll continue to do that moving forward because it was so successful, and it strains you defensively even more, not knowing, if you're trying to account for Jalen Milroe, is it going to be an inside run, outside run? I certainly think that helps. I loved the balance of that. And to me, that speaks to the game planning. I mean, what did you think about Nick Sheridan's performance? Because I felt like he was always one step ahead. Every time that he would be doing something, he knew what LSU was going to do to try to, counter and stop that. And he was one step ahead of them to make them pay for that. I just thought it was a masterful game plan by him. Do you agree?
No, I think it's a really bad point. You haven't really made a ton of good points yet on this episode. No, I mean, I agree. I agree with you. I think it was like, it just felt like at times during the season, from drive to drive, we didn't have an identity. And you would have drives where you come out and you would be really successful, either throwing or running or whatever, and then it would just be absent from it. The Tennessee game, I feel like I'm going to look up at the end of the season and it's still going to piss me off, because it's like that was such a winnable game and they just kept doing stuff to get in their own way. This one was, they knew exactly what they wanted to do. They came out and executed it. Like that's a run defense that, like, I mean, I think we could have had a ton more success through the air, but when you brought up the fact and said, yeah, like they struggled at times with like quarterbacks who can run. I don't even know if that word does it justice. Lenore Sellers had like 88 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. What's his name from A&M had 3 touchdowns in like less than 2 quarters of football. And then they gave up. Jalen Milroe had given up at least 2 rushing touchdowns to a starting running back or a starting quarterback in 4 of their 8 games this season. Like they just cannot figure out a way to keep them out of the end zone in the ground game. But I thought we were going to try to attack them with jam and Justice Haynes. I thought that was going to be the entire plan. So anytime we are running the offense through Jalen and it's not like monopolizing the entire game plan in a bad way like we saw in Tennessee, all for it.
I got a question, and both of you guys can try to answer. Are we going to be able to handle the success? Because I feel like the one downside about Milroe, and I like Milroe a lot, is that he struggled with the success. After the Georgia games twice. The Rose Bowl last year, and then obviously the Vanderbilt game this year. Are we going to be able to just stay focused on the things that we got to do and handle the fact that this team's kind of found something?
I worry about Chris. I worry about Chris handling this success. That's my biggest worry.
I can tell you right now, I'm not going to handle it well. I'm going to be a huge asshole.
Go ahead, Chris. I was just kidding.
God, man, you really just brought the mood down there. Just like it's so mature.
Gotta ask the question, the tough questions.
I think you're right, though. I mean, like that is the worst thing that could happen because, like, that the sense of like relief and confidence and like excitement after that Georgia game. Like, I mean, I shouldn't even admit this on air, but I remember telling I think it was like my mom at the time. She was like, "That was a good game." I was like, "What if we just got another Nick Saban? What if we got like the third Bear Bryant and Nick Saban?"
Yeah,
and that clearly has not like been the case necessarily, but like the next week was bad. The 2 weeks after that were what was worse. So I hope they've learned a lesson. I hope they can figure it out. Like they have to handle it well because, I mean, listen, you are back in the driver's seat. There, like when you had that Georgia win, you had like a 94% chance of making the college football playoff, and in 2 weeks it was gone. You cannot you can't afford to do it in general, but if you somehow mess this up and don't make the playoff at 10-2, especially with Oklahoma, Auburn, and Mercer on there, that is going to be a real tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, I mean when you talk about Mercer, and then the fact that Oklahoma's 4-4 right now, I believe. Did they drop to 4-5? I don't know.
Did you see how they lost last night?
No, I didn't see the very end of the game.
Oh, that was the entire game, Clint. They scored 4 touchdowns in the last 3 minutes and 8 seconds.
Well, okay, was this better? The quarterback play in that game was atrocious on both sides. From what I did see, I was kind of monitoring it, and then when it got, later when we started doing the post game show or getting ready for the post game show, Alabama, all that stuff. I stopped kind of paying attention. Maybe when I stopped paying attention is when the quarterback play picked up.
No, that did not happen at any point in that game. But
they're 5-5 and 1-5 in the conference.
Right.
I mean,
I think we lost Clint for right now. So Chris, I'll throw you up there.
It's not me. Good. I thought it was my internet.
Yeah. He's got new. So
man, I tell you what, it really is a good question, and it's something that they need to like look in the mirror and really address, I think, because it is in this season, just a calendar month ago, it is something that visibly happened because, and again, I think the bigger concern is it wasn't like it was just one game. It was multiple games where they didn't seem focused. So it's a huge, win to go out there, like literally in Death Valley, do what you always do in Baton Rouge, which is just absolutely dominate that team and that entire program there. But I mean, yeah, like I think I'm not concerned about Mercer. I'm not super concerned about Oklahoma. This team has played fairly well on the road. Listen, like one thing about Tennessee we don't really discuss is that defense has been one of the best defenses in the country. Right. So, like I hate to say it, but like maybe like not as an excuse, but I mean they haven't given up 20 points in a game all season, which is like I think it's them, Bama 2016, Bama 2011, and Georgia 2021 that have done that. So like maybe there's an excuse built in there. But man, if they somehow blew this to Auburn, that would be bad. I think that you are getting them in the perfect setup if they can avoid Atlanta to make an actual run in the playoff. Because here's the thing, Kalen DeBoer, you've seen what he can do off a bye week. He is 8-0 all time as a head coach coming off a bye week, winning those games by I think it was like 21.8 points per game. And he has been awesome this season in year one at Bama coming off a bye. So if you can rest up for the playoff, I think this team can definitely make a run.
They got Mercer coming up on Saturday, then obviously at Oklahoma, and then they play Auburn. What do you think Alabama's chances are of making the college football playoff if they went out?
Listen, I'm not going to sleep on Mercer. Okay, I know you want me to do that, but I'm not going to. They are a powerhouse from Macon, Georgia. No, I mean. I don't think I'm not worried about the Auburn game because you get them at home and they also are not very good. They should easily beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma just has no offense and they have so many flaws. I think they gave up more sacks in their first 4 or 5 games against SEC opponents this year than they had given up in the last like 3 seasons in a full regular season. So they have not adjusted well. I mean, again, like the dream scenario is win those 3 games. And I think you're automatically in because the resume is night game at LSU and you beat Georgia. And even with Georgia's loss yesterday, that win is going to carry some weight, I think, going forward. And also it's the brand. Like, the other, like our rivals and everyone else can get upset about it. But like yeah, I do think a 10-2 Bama team is probably 100% locked to make the playoffs. So I would say it's probably upwards of 80 to 90% if they win out. But man, if you can avoid Atlanta, and I mean that in general, Mick, like not even just in the SEC championship. I'm talking about like to you, our viewers, our listeners. If you can just avoid Atlanta at all costs, that's always a plus in life in general.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of where we're talking about too with the SEC championship game being a game that the teams would benefit not playing it, which is crazy to say.
Well, I mean, think about how thin we are in the secondary right now. Like you can't afford to lose anybody else.
Yeah, right. And then you go there but you know what? Winning a championship is winning a championship. I mean, those SEC championships matter. I mean, not a lot of teams even. There's teams in the conference that have never even been in that game, have never even won one, or it's been years since they won one. Alabama's won a ton of them, and I think they're all important. But you're right. I mean, if your quest is to win the national championship, that game it's a thorn in your side now, which I think is a problem for the SEC because they're going to have to figure out a way to make that game more meaningful.
It's so weird, man, because that was the staple and the catalyst for making the SEC the biggest brand and the biggest conference in all of college football back in '92. And they that documentary on that, how they just dodged a bullet thanks to Antonio Langham, is still pretty fascinating. But I mean, yeah, like for the longest time, that was the premier game of. I mean, like think about how many top 5 matchups, like top 4, like it's win and get in, it's like in the playoff era, and like those Bama Florida games in the late 2000s. Like there have been some really, really big matchups there. But that was like the first thought I had was like if you could avoid Atlanta, because at this point, like listen, I love winning championships as well. I like all of them seem to matter, sure. But the one at the end of the season is the one that matters the most. And
right.
if you can figure out a way, to make sure you have your best odds of getting to that, and especially if it's avoiding a game against a Texas or a Georgia or like a physical team like Ole Miss, then yeah, by all means, sit at home, man.
I hear you, man. Anything else you want to get into today as we celebrate I would say a monumental win, big win.
A monumental win.
Oh yeah. Look, I think if you're Kalen DeBoer, now you've beaten Georgia and you've beaten LSU. You go on the road, you got a dominating win. You beat one of your rivals. I just think that it's a big. I think these are really important wins for him early in his career.
Yeah, that's fair. I didn't think about it that way, but that's a really good point because I will say this: LSU is not Alabama's biggest rival, but make no mistake about it, Alabama is definitely LSU's biggest rival. Like they hate Alabama, and as somebody that works for ESPN Baton Rouge currently right now, they're the ones that sign my paychecks. Love those guys to death. I'm very grateful for the job, but they hate Alabama. And I think the funniest part of all this was as soon as Saban retired, I said this to Clint before his internet shut off, but when Saban retired, the 2 fan bases that were loudest about what was going to happen to Bama post Saban, and I'm not counting Auburn because they don't matter in football right now, but the 2 loudest fan bases were Georgia and LSU. And I just think it's hysterical that even with like those 2 programs kind of at their peak, like over the last couple of years, like, I mean, I know 2019 for LSU, but like they have been building to get back to like, contending for championships. Georgia is Georgia. It's incredible that in year one, like you said, in the DeBoer era, they woke up and it was Groundhog's Day all over again. And then everything still runs through Tuscaloosa.
I guess my last question for you is, what's the reaction going to be like in Baton Rouge this week or around the great Pelican state of Louisiana?
Dude, so I think that's what's weird because it feels like a majority of the talk around it is much more LSU wasn't prepared, horrible coaching, inexcusable, lack of coaching and preparation and whatever else. I'm sorry, guys. Very few people have said anything. All right, you know what? Maybe we'll just try this next time.
Yeah. You got some LSU fans in there that are you know what? We're tired of hearing about this. I can't wait to check out what's going on. Well, that ended. What happened? Was that a spank in there? Oh, you muted yourself.
I just muted myself.
All right. Well, look, Chris, fun talking. We got shut down by the dogs.
Don't say that. Don't even joke about that. Real quick, now that they're not freaking out at whoever's walking by the front door, I will say that the LSU fan base, like right now, is like, it's funny to me because I don't know why they do this to themselves every year and convince themselves that it's going to be different. Like DeBoer, Jalen Milroe aside, whatever. Like this has been their entire existence playing Alabama in Baton Rouge for 67 years. There's 6 total wins there. So, I mean, you look at even like the more recent success they've had. I think going to last night's game, they were 4-13 in the last 17 games against Bama. Those 4 wins by a total of 12 points. So, I think that it feels different because, we had that run under Saban where it's like, oh yeah, this is what we expect. This is the standard and blah, blah, blah. It does feel really, really important that the standard is still there and that you are still setting that as a program in games like this against those teams that have wanted to take that from you for years now.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with us here on a Sunday, talking Alabama. We're brought to you by mybookie.ag. Use the promo code next round to double your initial deposit. You can hang out with all of us at covercrimson.com. So take advantage of that. Right now, you get this shirt with the annual subscription. So as we rebrand and really, update the site, we want you to know that when you're part of the OG crew, you get a special badge for being on with us from the very beginning. And like and subscribe, thumbs up right here on the YouTube channel. We'll be back tomorrow with the press conference. We'll try to get the injury report. We'll talk more about Alabama moving forward, but a great win for the Crimson Tide, 42-13. And a dominating win and momentum now heading down the backstretch of the season. So we'll find out how this team will be able to deal with that. So for Chris and Clint, I'm Mick. Thanks, guys. Roll Tide.